Hi, I'm Stephen Tallamy, and in this video I wanted to give you a behind the scenes look at the Patchworks track that I put together for Christian Henson's birthday. Now, if you haven't heard the track already, then I will leave a link above and below to the video, plus I'll also leave a SoundCloud link if you just want to listen to it. Now, as part of the Piano Book team, I have been involved in a number of collaborative projects, including Music by 300 and Winter Voices, but in this case, this was the first time I was doing the actual production of the end result. And with over 140 tracks in the final piece, it certainly was one of the biggest projects I've worked on. So let's head back to the studio to take a look at the Logic project for the track. So before we take a detailed look into the track itself, I thought it would be useful to talk about how we got the different contributors involved and how they took part in the overall collaboration. So I put together this PDF to explain to the contributors exactly how they could get involved in the collaboration. You could see it as a sort of brief, and if you haven't seen my video on how to deliver successfully, some of the things that I talked about in that video I tried to contain inside of this PDF. So it explained effectively what you're going to be working on, which is you get a track from another composer. So the first composer would have been me, and then it would have gone out to other composers, and then they would be passing it on. You'd receive that. I gave some information about the BPM, explaining that there's a sync plot at bar 2, which I'll show you in the overall track, and then show you how to record it, give you a bit of spec on the type of instrumentation. I was mostly looking for people to use something from either Spitfire Audio or from Christian's piano book contributions, basically stuff from things that were in the influence of Christian, but I know that Christian's also a big proponent of using live instruments, so also if people wanted to record a live instrument, that was totally cool as well. I encourage people to think about using different types of parts, bass lines, drum tracks, melodies, harmonies, so not just writing all the same thing, because I needed a bit of variety, obviously, to build the overall track. They would then take their part, mix it with the original part, and pass it on to another composer. So you can see it like a sort of chain letter. They would also be sending back to me just their individual stem so that I could hear that and mix it into the overall piece. A few other instructions I gave, tech specs, contribution just in terms of naming of the files, just so I could track who had sent in what, and also a little bit on how people would send in the mix. So they'd send back to me their track with their name, but they would also add their initials to the overall branch. So I basically called these mixes, as they were being built up from the different composers, I called it a branch. And so you can see this is an example of how that might look. They would send in their stuff to a WeTransfer, which is generally a really good way of contributing stuff because it gets uploaded very reliably. And then there were a few other checklist things, again, at the very end, just to help people make sure they got everything they needed before they delivered it through to me. So let's take a look actually at some of these branches and how they worked out. So I kept these actually got sent to me as well. So there were a few initial starting points beyond the original piano part that I wrote. There were a few original starting points. So this first one here is from Simon Fife. So that was using the Allan cello sample that Christian made. We've got here something from Joshua Meltzer. So that's Joshua playing on his guitar. And then we've also got here something from Dave Hillowitz. So a very interesting granular piano part. And then you can see things built up. So any of these original starting points, then if I go for Simon's contributions, you can see that various branches got built out of this. So this is a branch that was quite established. So if we play that one.
So let's take and listen to another branch. This one is actually from the Spitfire composers. So you've got Louis, Lucy, you've got Cairo, then you've got Dan Keane, you have got Homai, and then Oliver. So you can see that each of these branches themselves are pieces of their own, and some of them have gone in a very different direction from each other. So what I had to do then is take the various different contributions and bring them into the main track. So now if we look at the overall track, one of the things that was interesting about trying to mix all of this together was I had actually deliberately created a fairly ambiguous tonality in the piece. It wasn't clear whether it was going major or minor, and different people had taken a different approach. So actually some people took it into a major key, some took it into a minor key, some actually modulated. And so one of the first challenges of bringing together the overall track was deciding which parts of those went there. So actually the overall track does tip from minor and major and back and forwards, but obviously if someone had chosen major harmonies, I couldn't mix that in the parts where I went for minor. So that's why you'll see there's lots of little bits of chopping here and there. That's to really try to make the tonality and the harmony work together. Now, we've got lots of different stems here. We've got the string stack, a woodwind stack, we've got a vocal stack, some synths, guitars, harp, and tune percussion. We've got basses and drums. And then at the end, we have the coda, which we'll talk about later. If we just take the piano stack, it's got my original piano part, and it actually starts off with Stratus by Oliver Arnolds. So he used his own sample library from Spitfire. And so then the next part here is from Fred Poirier. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, definitely do. He's an amazing guy. He's done a load of decent sampler conversions for the piano book community along with his own sample instruments. So we can hear this melody quite clearly actually in the overall track. So that is the Jangle Box piano from Spitfire Audio. Every track pretty much has some EQ on it, and then I also added a little bit of stereo delay to give it a bit of interesting width. Let's have a listen from bar 61. So we have lots of really interesting piano textures there. Richard Schreiber here, he does a lot of trailer music, and he actually made a lot of his early career writing piano tracks using the felt piano from Spitfire Audio. So the felt piano that Christian put together over 10 years ago, that was a major influence on his career. So he was very excited to add that in there. We've got the gaffer. This is where Christian took gaffer tape to his piano, and that gives lots of interesting textures there. We've got Max's Bentley. If you remember, Christian went and recorded Max Maguire's Bentley piano, and of course the Lab Soft piano as well. So really nice piano parts there. So let's now listen to the string stack. I'm going to keep my original piano part just so it has the context. The strings start off with some amazing live string recordings by Philip Shepherd, and you can see he contributed a wide range of parts from basses, from leads, lots of cello work, of course, that's his primary instrument. So let's take a little listen to the start of the piece with that. And then from bar 13, we've got some lovely string parts coming in. We've got Keith Theodoso on the album One Strings. We have Andrea. She was doing the chamber evolutions. Those come in really nicely. A little bit of Albion Tundra from Trevor Morris. And also Carlos Rafael Rivera also had quite a range of different parts all mixed together. I think in this first part, again, we're hearing some of the Oliver Arnold's chamber evolutions. And then one of the lead lines that really comes out in the piece are those beautiful parts by Anna Phoebe, who recorded live violin. So let's listen to bar 53. It's just amazing to hear this combination of live strings and sampled strings. It really is a powerful combination. Let's listen to the Woodwind stack now. Really interesting parts here, lots of live parts actually. We've got live native flute from John Mayer, and we've got live shakuhachi. And then another key melodic idea that comes out in the piece was provided by Paul Thompson in clarinet here. And let's take a listen to bar 77, which in general is the sort of peak of the piece. So really beautiful, adding some live bass flute from Anders Wall. We've also got some parts from Pete Morgan. So loads of really beautiful stuff there in that woodwind stack. Very, very different when you listen to that on its own to the overall piece at that point, but they all add some beautiful textures. Now we've got the brass stack, and surprisingly not very many brass instruments were included. We do have Jo Ranger, who is a brass player herself. She used the Labs Field trumpet, and we've got some stuff from Angus. So let's first listen at bar 45, where I think Jo's part comes in. And later on, you can really hear those Abbey Road 1 horns from Angus. So if we take a look at the vocal stack here, one of the starting elements is from Christian's brother Joe, and he's used a sample of Keaton and Johnny. So Keaton's their other brother. So let's have a listen to that. Then we've got this wonderful combination of live vocals by Aeralie Brighton and then some solstice choir from Marianne Fisher. And then later on, and you probably heard this from the Spitfire Composers branch, we've got some live vocals from Homai, and then David Cadell also added some of the Eric Whittaker choir. And then by the end, we also are layering in the Micah's choir, which is one of the piano book instruments that I know Christian really, really enjoyed. Onto the synths, and again, there's a whole range of different stuff here. There's some labs in here. We've got some of the stack. We've got a live Wurlitzer from Oliver. A whole bunch of different interesting synth textures. Let's play from bar 13 just so we can hear some of that. So then another key driver to the overall track came from Ashley Brouwer, and she used a Novation Summit, which I know Christian really, really enjoys that synth, and created a really nice art part, which you'll hear throughout the piece. And again, let's go to bar 77, where it's all kind of kicking off, and listen to all of the different synth parts together. Now down to the guitar part, and you can see the Labs Peel guitar was very popular. Both Katie and Helen used it. Helen did a full stack of different Peel guitar parts, but you've got some stuff from Solstice as well. Let's play maybe from bar 53. So down to the harp and tune percussion stack, we've obviously got some Solstice Nursery here. We've got the titanium euphone. Christopher Belsey did that, which is one of Christian's instruments. We've got some tubular bells, all sorts of really nice stuff. Even a live array marimba from Sam Ekoff. You can get his library on Piano Book. So let's take another listen to that, maybe from bar 53. And maybe let's take a listen to bar 77. So down to the bass stack, the main bass part here is from Cairo on the Dark Star house. There's also a really nice bass part here from Andrea, and there is some synth bass and a secret thickness bass synth, which I'm sure you can guess what that is, EXS. And also then there's some live bass from Joe Henson. So let's take a listen to this from bar 37. So you'll also notice here that I did chop Cairo's part up and reorganize it a little bit. That was just so that it could fit with the melodic ideas that were on top of it, which obviously he wasn't hearing because he wasn't hearing the overall track. So we've got some drums here. The key parts here was Max Maguire's drums and Pete DeFlint's. So those provide the foundation. And as I mentioned in my live cymbal swells part, James Walker, one of my friends, also added some live cymbal swells, some live sticks, some live drum toms, and that made a big difference. And then towards the end, we've got quite a lot of really interesting percussion parts from Angus. So let's listen to some of that percussion towards the end. And then there is this coda, which was an unexpected surprise from Trevor Morris. Basically, as the piece ended in the original piano part, he then augmented the piece with this coda that gives it a really nice ending. And you can see he used some of the Abbey Road 1, he used some Eric Whittaker choir, some booms, some synth bass. And Trevor gave this coda a name. He called it the Fanfare for the Common WILLIE. That works in London, lives in Edinburgh. That's obviously Christian. So let's just take a listen to that part on its own. Absolutely beautiful. So I just want to point out some of the production techniques that I used to bring the track together. One of the key things I already pointed out, I used a bit of stereo delay on some of those parts. That gives a little bit more ambience to those parts, which I thought was really nice to fit it in. So I then have Fab Filter Pro Q on pretty much every track here. Some of them are just really doing a roll off of the low end or the high end. Some of them were a bit more surgical in their use, just to move down a certain parts that were maybe clashing. Lots and lots of panning, as you can see, just to spread things out in the stereo field. When you've got this many tracks, certainly we need a bit more stereo spread. But I also used the Logic built-in spread plugin, which you can see I've got here on Richard's felt piano, just to give it a bit more width so that it was not all in the middle of the mix and more out to the sides, because there was a lot going on in the middle. So I used that on a few of the tracks. Obviously a few compressors here and there, that was necessary just to bring things in. So you can see a lot of the parts are also getting sent out to a bus here, bus 10, and that bus is my reverb. In this case I kept things relatively simple. I have the Fab Filter Pro R on the medium church setting, which just gave a really nice way of gluing together the various tracks. And then on the mastering bus, you can see here I've got Ozone set up. So this preset was actually created by Simon Fife. What I did was I sent him the mix bus, so the mix down version of everything, and then he played with it in Ozone standalone. And then he saved that preset, sent me the XML file. I imported that into my Ozone 9. And then you can see that we've got a bit of vintage EQ on there. We've got something to bring up the high end. We've got then also a maximizer and a limiter to give us those mastering presets. So it was really useful to provide this track to Simon, because obviously my ears had heard the track so many times. It was really good to get a second pair of ears to hear what the effect of mastering was doing. But it was also useful for me to be able to bring that back into the track, so that when I was doing some final tweaks of the mix, I could listen to it in the mastered version. Now, I won't do a full track playthrough because that's in the original video, so I'll just leave a link to that, but I will give a link below also to a SoundCloud version of the overall track. What I might do just is play the overall track and then mute in and out some of the different stems just so you can see how they contributed to the overall track.
I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough, and if you've got any tips on collaborations or mixing a project of this size, then please do leave them in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, then please do give it a thumbs up, share and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.